Alright, so this is my final speech of the semester, and I know that I'm a little bit late, but I'm just really proud to have finished, and I think that this might be the best one so far. It's fresh, so I don't have it memorized, but it comes from my heart. So it's a sincere story, and it's definitely something that I would like to share, and that I think um, invites my audience to participate with me. So, with no further ado, I would like to begin. Anyone who knows me might describe me as a friendly and outgoing person. I can start a conversation with anyone, and I like to make others laugh. But what most people don't know is that I've struggled with severe depression and anxiety for most of my life. So, although there was a time when this kind of admission felt like a burden that I couldn't admit, it's something that I'd have to carry in secret and isolation, I realize now that there are benefits to what my pastor calls doing life together. Um, because as a kid, I was a loner, and I grew up with a very private family, and I was warned against talking too much or like sharing family business outside of the home. So I grew up being kind of like secretive and very sneaky. I was always afraid of like doing or saying the wrong thing, and I would eventually just kind of like clam up and hold a lot of stuff inside. So on the outside, I'd be very outgoing, but on the inside, I was a wreck. I constantly lived on edge in a state of offense because I was so defensive. I was afraid to be vulnerable and afraid to be wrong, and this made me highly unlikable. And I always took that really personally because I never had any practice with successful friendships. There was a point where I wasn't invited to be friends, and then I kind of learned to push people away, so I wasn't inviting them in either. Um, Anyone from this season of my past could tell you that I was not a nice person. I think I looked pretty well put together on the outside, but on the inside, my heart was a mess. I hadn't learned how to cultivate and maintain healthy relationships. I had no concept of money. I felt very entitled to things that I hadn't worked for, and I didn't understand the gravity of the decisions that I was making until much later in life. So I say that I was living for the moment and not in the moment. So this made me very thirsty, and I was always hustling and always scheming and hungry and discontent, and always trying to find a way to get more, to fill like the shallow emptiness that I felt inside. So I say that I was living an example of that saying, hurt people, and that was definitely me. So every day in my own skin felt like work. I was stiff and high strung and insecure and micromanaged everything with an internal anxiety that was like driving my attention to details that I could not let go. And so it was only a matter of time before I cracked. And I used the image of Humpty Dumpty falling from the wall to describe how I felt off my high horse and down into the abyss, from rock bottom 1, rock bottom 2, rock bottom 3, in sequential order like Dante's Inferno, literally living hell. So it took an act of God to kind of pick me up and put the pieces back together to make me a whole, thriving person. So since I began my faith journey, I've learned how to live in completely new ways. So I was baptized, and I am now what you would call born again, which means I had to be raised again in ways as well. this is definitely like a terminology in my faith. We would refer to that as insider language. So because this is for a class, I'll save some of that. You can talk to me about it another time if you like. But I would like to share one kind of lasting, universal lesson that I can take away from this. And that is be grateful. Because gratefulness begins within and it changes everything. I recently read an article from Business Insider titled Lonely, Burned Out, and Depressed, the State of Millennials. And it talks about mental health in the 2020s. And so in it, there's two co-writers, Hillary Hoffler and Alana Akhtar. And they share the most disturbing statistics. Basically, as a group, millennials are pessimistic. And to quote the article, the forecast for millennials' mental health in 2020 doesn't look pretty. Depression and deaths of despair are both on the rise among the generation, linked to issues such as loneliness and money issues. And this article was in Business Insider. What I found interesting about the article is the light in which the statistics are shared. For example, there are statistics showing that millennials are more likely to seek mental health counseling than any other generation. So as the adopted child of boomers, I can honestly say that I wish my parents went to counseling. Higher rates of reported mental illness doesn't necessarily mean increased rates of mental illness. It simply means an increased awareness. So to quote Abraham Maslow, who we discussed briefly in class, well, not briefly, but we discussed in class, what is necessary to change a person is to change his awareness of himself. So I think that a demographic of people largely willing to assess themselves and seek solutions or skills to problem solve is a step in the right direction. The article also states that many millennials have reported feeling burnout and quit their jobs for mental health related reasons. And to that, I would counter that millennials are indeed changing normative practices in the workforce. Both Forbes and Entrepreneur magazine often publish articles and infographics illustrating trends in entrepreneurship among my demographic. So, to quote an article in the Utah Business Online, where author Kelsey Foreman, I'm going to reference her a lot, delves into the perceived attitudes of millennial professionals. She says, does it have something to do with the perceived attitudes of millennial professionals? For better understanding, I asked Eric Ray, a fellow millennial, as well as a co-founder and CEO of Silicon Slopes-based tech giant Podium. He says, I think it's a matter of engagement. It's been my experience that millennial professionals deeply value being connected to what they're doing and the effect it's having on the world. So this doesn't sound negative. It sounds like the quitting isn't just driven by a need to break away. And so she goes on to quote another executive who said almost the same thing. Millennial workers are wanting to make a difference. They're wanting to be changed. They're wanting to explore new ideas and opportunities, says Cassie Whitlock, the Director of Human Resources at Bamboo HR. So what I'm getting at is the same statistics showing the same demographic, doing the same exact thing, can be interpreted in distinctly different ways depending on perspective. So I would submit to you that any aspect of life can be interpreted this way. So whether we're interpreting statistics or whether we're interpreting realities of our everyday situations. The Harvard Health published an article on the benefits of gratitude titled Giving Things Can Make You Happier. Multiple psychological studies were performed at various research institutes, and they're all listed in the article. They support the positive effect gratefulness has on health, relationships, and overall mental and emotional well-being. To summarize the article, I found this direct quotation. Gratitude is a way for people to appreciate what they have, instead of always reaching for something new in hopes it will make them happier, or thinking they can't feel satisfied until every physical and material need is met. Gratitude helps people refocus on what they have instead of what they lack. And although it may feel contrived at first, this mental state grows stronger with use and practice. So this article closes with a disclaimer stating that people who are diagnosed with chronic mental health conditions should absolutely consult with their doctors for medical treatment. However, as someone who has benefited from medical treatment for both depression and anxiety, I can attest that the benefits of intentional lifestyle choices determined to create or find an opportunity for gratitude, it's life-changing. For example, we all share an intimate experience. Oh, sorry, I'm misreading my own speech. I'm saying that I want to share an intimate experience that was both terrifying and liberating in a way that will affect me for the rest of my life. In 2016, I hit one of my lowest personal lows when I attempted suicide and landed in an inpatient hospital for mental health. It was there that I realized how years of unhealthy behavior patterns had finally caused me to implode. Thankfully, I had the option to receive treatment, but so many people don't. So every day that I'm alive, whether it's a good day or a bad day, it's an opportunity that many people didn't live to see. So I'll return to the Business Insider article to quote more statistics. More millennials are dying deaths of despair or deaths related to drugs, alcohol, and suicide. Suicide attempts have especially increased among Black youths. A recent Blue Cross Blue Shield report found that millennials are seeing their physical and mental health decline at a faster rate than Gen X as they age. Without proper management or treatment, millennials could see a 40% uptick in morality compared with Gen Xers of the same age. Millennials don't always have someone to share their mental health burdens with. They're less likely to have social support than other generations. They're marrying later and less connected to political or religious communities. In fact, YouGov called millennials the loneliest generation. So this is based on a survey that polled 1,254 U.S. adults. And it found that millennials are more likely to feel lonely than previous generations. So of survey respondents, this is from YouGov, 30% of millennials said they always or often felt lonely, compared with 20% of Gen X and only 15% of boomers. More millennials also reported in the survey that they had no acquaintances, friends, close relatives, or best friends. It's so strange to read statistics about my experiences within my demographic, and it's even more strange when I realize that they're correct. However, sorry, I need some water. Having worked in the public service industry, one thing I can say about statistics is that they treat any demographic as a monolithic group, right? And so we are all just one decision or one survey away from either breaking or perpetuating this statistic. As the world around us seems to pause due to mandatory quarantine restrictions and commerce has all but stopped due to many places of business being closed and widespread job loss and furloughs, delays in the distribution of government benefits and unemployment and relief aid, and school closures and social distancing and mandated shelter-in-place orders, now seems like the perfect time to freak out, right? Like, we can feel the pressure to panic and kind of withdraw into ourselves and spiral into the abyss of anxiety and depression. However, I would like to suggest another way. Let's see, I'm scrolling. Okay. And there really is another way. As someone who's experienced some of life's lowest lows, I can share from experience that any situation can always be worse. But instead of dwelling on the possibilities of the bad that could be, a mental state of gratefulness is like lighting a match in a cave. The light shines much brighter when everything is dark. And to quote Aristotle, it is our darkest moments that we must focus to see the light. One of the benefits of gratitude is motivation and inspiration to endure tough times so that we can motivate and inspire others who will eventually go through the same thing, inevitably. One of the most interesting things I realized in my research is that, according to statistics, almost my entire generation feels lonely. So, if we're all lonely, then we're not alone. We're all going through the same thing. So, instead of turning inward, we should turn outward and reflect on the ways that life is worth living and offer motivations to inspire someone else going through the same thing, because that gives purpose. Personally, I have a great community within my church. And frankly, this is why I'm a member of 3 churches. I like them all for different reasons. Nobody's perfect, and every group is made of different demographics, and every demographic has different strengths. While we're quarantined, I can't go to any of churches. I can't physically meet with them and hug them or talk to the kids and just kind of like get that encouragement and that spark of joy. But while we're quarantined, we meet online and I can still interact with them. And when we do return to church, I look forward to the moments when the lights turn down and the music turns up and it's dark and I can just sit in the back of my pew and like lay down all the burdens that I've been carrying with me all week long. It's a chance to kind of empty and be refilled, right? So for me, the way that I like to be refilled is through reading my Bible, because it's an act of worship, and worship is like thinking about someone other than myself. And also, it's a way to turn my attention onto something that's like replenishing. So once I read the Bible, I think about the Bible. And if I'm like meditating on scripture, then I'm not spiraling again into the depression and like thinking about myself. So I don't have to go physically to church to do this, although I enjoy doing it there. I've done it enough times to where I can create the habit internally. But regardless of how hard we try, we can't fill ourselves. We aren't designed that way. So for me, reading my Bible is refreshing. I read it and I think about it, and then I have something to pour into other people, and if they're full of something, then they can pour back into me. And this is community. This is how we're not alone. It's not that I need other people going through the problems with me. It's that I'm going through the problem, and then once I get filled up, I can fill someone else, and then they're going through their problem and they can get filled up, and then they can fill me, and then it's a reciprocal community. We still have that daily challenge of choosing not to spiral, right? So that choice and that pouring out and filling up is how we do life together. So sure, there are things that we face independently, but we're not alone. And that is something to be grateful for.